Hi, everybody. It's Kim from Expressions of the Universe, and I'm here to do a little astrology prediction for you can see it, the United States elections of 2024. We are a little bit more than 30 days out from the elections. I know a lot of you don't even live in this country, but many of you do. And what I've been working on for years actually was looking at this election for years and years. However, it got switched up, which makes it even more interesting because I couldn't see, who would have the best outcome. And now it's switched up and things are a little different. What I would love to do, though, is show you an unbiased analysis of the astrology, but in a different way than I normally do, mixed in with a little bit of my other astrology, um, and show you and let you decide who you think, based on the analysis, who you think may win. Because I'm not really 100% sure. One moment I am, the next I'm not. And then I've been looking at these charts for so long, I really can't make up my mind. So I thought, let's do this. I've had these slides made up for so long, months, and I was kind of afraid to share it because I didn't want to get any negative feedback, because I am trying to stay as politically unbiased as possible and just come at this from a scientific perspective, from an astrologer's perspective. And I know there have been so many predictions out there. Um, and I wanted to jump on the bandwagon before everybody else did and put my prediction out. And something just kept pulling me back. Um, just to read you a little bit of what I wrote in the companion blog for this. I will be posting the charts that you will see in this presentation. I'm going to post them in a companion blog in case you wanted to click on those charts and analyze them yourselves and take a look at what I'm talking about here in today's presentation. So, as public as I am, mundane political astrology is an area that I've kept close to my chest and within a protected circle of master astrologers. Politics can be such a touchy subject, even when analyzing a subject from an unbiased point of view. I've been sitting on this data for years. I have made a concerted prediction within my close-knit circle, but never publicly. I do not intend to make a prediction 100% on this election's outcome, but you'll hear my insights and why I think something may be better than the other or whatever as far as the planetary aspects are concerned. My intention today is to provide data and analytics for informational purposes only, and let you, the viewer, decide based on the astrology and also based on history. Because most astrologers, well, at least I know I do, and I'm pretty sure most do, we look back in time at history to see, well, what were the planets doing back during this time? Or if we see a planetary alignment, we'll look back in history to see, well, when did this happen before? Because then that helps us to make a prediction now or for the future. So I get so excited when I'm looking at astrological aspects, and I attempt to explain what it is that I'm seeing when I'm reviewing a chart. But to the layperson, to you, it could be all Greek. People do understand the planets can have effects on one's life. And I do not believe that that's just a coincidence. That is why I'm so enamored with the scientific study of the universe. My primary hesitation in providing a presentation sooner is due to the amount of information available on the subject and the analysis of the candidates. There's just so much. It's overwhelming. I get overwhelmed and then I freeze in my head. Like in my head, I know exactly what I want to say and what I want to do and how I want to present it, but it does overwhelm me and then I have to walk away. In the wake of the eclipses of autumn, I had an epiphany, a way to show and present my information in a different way that may resonate with all of you a little more. I'm tempted at this presentation to also present some traditional views and astrological wheels, which I will probably do that, but I don't want to get too far into the minutia of too much data. That's where I could lose you to all the boredom if you cannot follow my analysis. The method for my epiphany analysis is called secondary moon declination progressions. A secondary moon declination graph is a visual representation that tracks the declination of the moon over time. So it's kind of like peaks and valleys, showing its position relative to the celestial equator. The graph helps astrologers like myself understand how the moon's movements can influence life events and emotional states in a person's life. The moon is progressed one day for every 1 year of life. The moon takes approximately 28 to 30 days to complete a full cycle from new to full. And so therefore, the progression cycle that will be shown in these graphs for each person will represent about 28 to 30 years of life. And looking back at history and historic events in the world or a public person's life, it's really easy to see when they have had peaks and valleys in their lives. And it can be predicted when looking into the future what types of events, highs and lows they will experience. The same can be done with an astrological wheel and different types of progressions, but this graphic ephemeris of time is such a great quick visual to show you those peaks and valleys and then point out the exact dates of the peaks and valleys. When I was recently viewing one, it hit me how easy it is for anyone to see if someone is coming into a highlighted period of time of their life or if they're on a downswing. So, with that being said, I'm gonna share my screen and hope that I select the correct presentation. And I want to be able to offer this service too. I started writing it up and it will be coming soon on my website at expressionsoftheuniverse.com. As always, now I'm losing my voice. Great. Luckily, I have a bottle of water right here. As always, you know, I have to do my little disclaimer. The content in this presentation is for entertainment, enjoyment, and folly. This program is for informational purposes only, and you can read the rest. So our first candidate that we will be discussing is George Washington. I picked George Washington and Abraham Lincoln because, you know, they're long gone, but they are so famous for what they did in United States history. So I have a little detail of George's highlights of his life. I really want to focus, though, on 1775 through 1799. So this is when he became commander in chief. He was appointed commander in chief of the Continental Army in 1775. And he became the first president of the United States in 1789. He served a second term in 1793, and then he retired in 1797, which he lived for 2 more years after that, and he passed in 1799. So this is the graphic ephemeris. And let me see if I can make it a little bigger. What I wanted to do is be able to show you something like this in real time, and I believe I can switch over to it. But so we'll keep it in our mental thought. So here's 1775. Now, what I would do as an astrologer, let me back up a little bit. These peaks and valleys are the declination of the moon as it evolves through a person's life. The moon is based on a person's own personal natal chart that comes when they are born. The planets here are George's planets that are in his natal chart, but they're done in a graphic ephemeris. And then what we do is we take the moon and we progress it through the chart. And as it hits these planets or these lines in the chart, see, will I be able to blow this up? Oh, I can. I can. So let's take a look here. In about 1769, 1770, the moon was peaking all the way up at the top, and it was out of bounds. Let me pull this over. Whoa, it did the wrong thing. There we go. The moon was out of bounds. Anything over about 23 degrees, either to the north of the equator, here's the equator, or to the south, it's out of bounds. So some really big things happen on these peaks and valleys. And right here, around 1768, it's hitting Neptune. So then I would look at, well, what is the flavor of, Neptune with the moon? The interesting thing, and it wasn't during this time, but Neptune and the moon, it's intuition, it's sometimes lack of clarity. I don't know my direction. I'm not sure which way I want to go. But it also is very intuitive. And it was said that when George Washington was at Valley Forge and also Washington's Crossing, he was seeing apparitions that kind of led him to the victory. They guided him, these apparitions, they guided him, which eventually led to the victory of the colonists over the British ruler. And so that could be an activation there. But let's see, now we have the ascendant, which the rising sign in your chart always shows up on that eastern horizon. It's running alongside that south node. And this is where the moon is peaking, right about 1770. So this is when he began to come into that place of, entering the Continental Army. The colonies were in an uproar, things were getting a little crazy. Now, interestingly enough, 1775, where he became the commander in chief, we are on a decline. We're going into a downward spiral, into a valley, but that's not always a bad thing. But it's like this was his highlight. And even though he's taking a more important role, he's still on the decline towards retirement, so to speak, possibly. So 1775, I would take my mouse and I would pull down right about here and see, well, what is the moon crossing in 1775? So if I go over to the left here, it's Pluto. So that is so interesting because Pluto represents in mundane astrology power and authority. And so here he is stepping in and taking command of the Continental Army. If we go into 1776, the American Revolution, beginning of, it is crossing yet again another planet. Let's see what that is. So we have to follow this purple line up there. It's not showing me anything. Wait a second. So this purple line is what I'm looking for, and that's Mercury. So this would indicate to me, with the moon crossing this Mercury line, that's about communications and getting the word out and, speaking your truth and standing up for who you are. So this is just a small example of what I was talking about. It's pretty interesting to see how these spots in time actually do align with big moments in his life. Now, if we look at 1789, the war is over. He becomes the president of the United States, the first president of the United States. The moon is crossing, let's see, it's crossing the sun over here on the right. Yes. Oh, sorry. It's crossing the sun. So here we are, 1789. This is the sun line. Well, that is also power. That is authority, the father of our country. In astrology, the sun represents the father. Often the moon is the mother. So that makes perfect sense to me. And then here he is going into another peak. However, we know that he passes in 1799 when he's going into another decline. And what is it crossing? The moon is crossing Neptune. And Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces, which is also 12th house. And that could be death, the other side, the other world. Intuition, of course, again, hospitals and infirmaries and jails and the like. So we know that he served from 1789 all the way through 97, and that's where he reached his peak. If I go over here, I believe these lines are the ascendant and the south node again. So he's coming through the same peak that he experienced in 1769 when he was building up his career. So hopefully you're understanding where I'm coming from. 1769, what happened? Well, he got married in 1759, so I'm sure he was starting a family. Um, these are only the key highlights, but you can really see, looking at these dates, what was happening in his life. And it's so easy to see those peaks and valleys, right? Um, Moving on. Now I have Abraham Lincoln, and hopefully you're still with me. I am going to be breaking down Donald Trump, JD Vance, Kamala Harris, and Tim Walz's charts in this same fashion so that you, when I give you the data, you discern for yourself who you think this could be. But I also have the, the traditional charts available. We'll see how this goes. And I may just skim over them just for good measure. So, anyway, the key highlights for Abraham Lincoln: he became a lawyer in 1836. He was elected to the Whig Party 10 years later. In 1860, he was elected President of the United States. In 61, inaugurated as the 16th President of the United States. Okay, in 63, issued the Emancipation Proclamation. He delivered the Gettysburg Address. In 1865, he was elected president again and inaugurated. However, he was shot and killed on April 14th at Ford's Theater. So here we have Abraham Lincoln's chart, 1820s through 1870s. I had to pull it out to get a good visual on this 1865. And we can see his peaks and valleys. They're not, he doesn't have the high highs that George Washington did. So you see George Washington is way up there. And I would say, looking at that George Washington probably had a bigger ego than Abraham Lincoln. I would think Abraham Lincoln was a much more humble person. Um, Interestingly enough, as well, is that he does not have a huge spread of planets above the equator. All of his planets, with the exception of Venus and the South Node, are all below the equator. So to me, he's living in the underworld. He was also very psychic and he had premonitions as well. His wife dabbled in astrology herself. Abraham Lincoln also used to consult astrologers, but I feel like he could have been very depressed person. Um, but we're not going there. We're just looking at this for peaks and valleys. So 1860, very short career period, actually. So let me zoom in on that. 1860, he's elected as President of the United States. So let's see, where is this moon? It's hitting a lot of planets in his chart. It's almost hard to see, but it looks as though it is actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's hitting his Saturn. So this little dotted line is his Saturn line. And Saturn talks about commitments. It talks about obligations. And often when I look at Saturn in a chart, I'm thinking about what should you be doing for a living? What is your journey as far as your career is concerned? Because it's not like, not a job per se or something you like to do. This is something that's more serious. and committed, um, and having to put in the work and the time and the hours. Now, in 1863, Gettysburg Address, the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, let me back up. 1861, here we have the Civil War. Civil War broke out in part because Abraham Lincoln was elected president. So it kind of makes sense with all of this chaos going on down here. I mean, all of the planets are becoming engaged almost, it seems. And so it's almost hard for me to read it because the lines are so close to each other. However, so let's see, 1861, we're leaving that Saturn phase and then he's coming into a Pluto phase. This is pretty tough, but Pluto, remember when I said about George Washington, this is Abraham Lincoln actually stepping into that power. So he made the commitment and now he's stepping into the power. Now we go to 1863, pivotal time in his presidency. What is the moon doing? It is crossing the sun. Here is that tan colored dotted line. And we know from George Washington's chart that that was the sun. So here, people are looking up to him. They are respecting him by 1863. People are taking his words to heart. And, you know, most of us know that that is all true. When he would speak, people would listen. It, you know, he was very tall. I believe he was 6'5", and then he wore that huge top hat. So he was about close to nearly 7 feet tall. And with his slim build, he just had this presence of authority. And I don't know, there's something about Abraham Lincoln that I just love. He reminds me of my own grandfather. I think that's why. Unfortunately, he's elected again in the 1864 election, and then he is assassinated shortly after the inauguration. So let's see what was happening. This is 1865. 1864 was the election. So what am I seeing? This black line is, I'm going to have to go over here. The black line is his north node. And the north node is showing that he was destined to be exactly where he was, right place, right time. This was his destiny. And then 1865, and this is early 1865, the moon declination is going over his Chiron, the wounded healer. And, you know, maybe I'll do a chart with him at some point where I'll show you the regular chart with this so that we can take a look and see like what is actually going on in the astrological wheel. But normally I would see something of either maybe a Jupiter aspect, Jupiter, Saturn, even Pluto, but Chiron. So this is interesting. He hits that place. And when I did it live, I think I can do a new share and show you what it looks like live. Abraham Lincoln, his Chiron was in Aquarius, and he had Aquarius sun and a Capricorn moon. And look, his Chiron is in the 12th house, which is also, you know, endings. So that is interesting because we can look at that graph and correlate it into a chart like this. But I'm going to show you what that graph looks like in real time. So here is Abraham Lincoln's graph. Oh, it's got it has futuristic dates. Oh my goodness. We want Jan let's see, January 1 of 1820, and we'll do 60 years of time for him. All right. So when I'm in my program, you can see as I move my mouse, it's giving me exact dates and it's also giving me the degrees. So when I'm down here, and I can't make this screen bigger or the program bigger, but we'll take a look at this Chiron line. And where is this? Right about where it's hitting this Chiron line. Uh, this is saying April 29th of 1865. So this is actually about 2 weeks following his assassination, but it's hard sometimes to get the mouse on the exact spot. So here, if I'm right here, this is April 11th of 1865. And this is why I find this graphic ephemeris and the secondary progression and declination of the moon to be so fascinating, because it's uncanny how accurate these dates are. Right, I'm going to go back to my presentation. Let me see. Um, here is my presentation. I think this is it. Yes. Okay. Ah, so many screens to choose from. All right, so here now I have set you up for what is to come. Now I'm going to get into the presidential candidates charts, and I hope that you're following me through all of this. Okay, here we go. The next chart, well, we have Joe Biden, and I just wanted to show this really quickly. He was the original Democratic candidate. And when I did the traditional astrological wheels for him and Donald Trump, it was so close. It was neck and neck. And I really just could not see um, who was going to win. And the more I looked at Joe Biden's charts over the last couple of years, I could see that there was some sort of an illness. There was something coming, something looming. He was definitely hit head on by several eclipses last year. And those eclipses, they can carry their energy for up to 18 months. And the eclipses kept hitting points in his chart, mostly his sun and his moon, which are the vital life forces in his chart. With that being said, when I was together with an astrologer peer, we were analyzing charts one night, and this was on October 23rd of 2023. We were looking at the transits with the upcoming charts, and we both said that we could see a woman coming in. Now, at that time, Nikki Haley was running to become the Republican representative, the Republican candidate. And, but we knew Kamala Harris was the vice president. Never thought anything of it, but we could see in the chart, and I wanted to present that, and I never did. Uh, time and money are short, but um, we could definitely see that there was a woman entering the picture. It looked to me as though either Donald Trump or Joe Biden would fall ill and they would be replaced by a woman. And here we are a year later, And when we did the chart, we were pretty sure that it was Kamala Harris stepping in. And so when it happened, my friend and I were just shocked. And we were also excited that we were so accurate. And I wish that I would have shared that information because then I would have it on record. I do have it on record because we record our sessions. But anyway, getting back to Joe Biden, you can see that he was on the upswing. Here's the 2020 election, and his moon was it was peaking and going over Mercury. I believe that's Mercury. It's not Venus, is it? Oh, it is Venus. Okay, so it is Venus. Um, which really it's lovely, and it is about money and that softer, gentler type of energy. And then his career has peaked. And then here we have in 2023, when at the beginning of 23, here it's crossing Neptune. So to me, that says unsure about a few things. Something's foggy. Neptune, as a medical astrologer, I often think of illness when I see that. So I wouldn't be surprised if early 2023, maybe he was coming down with something or showing signs that he was not doing well. And I really used to never pay attention to politics ever. So I couldn't really tell you what was happening back then. Um, then here we have at the end of 23, the the moon is crossing his midheaven, and that is about the career. Now, interestingly enough, this is on the upswing. So you would think that he's getting ready for another peak, even into 2029. But that's not always the case. And you saw that in George Washington's chart that when he was in a valley or in a downward trend, that's when he was gearing up to step into become the commander of the Continental Army. So sometimes these peaks and valleys could be a little deceiving. And here we are in 2024. And what is this moon, progress moon declination doing? It is crossing his Chiron. Now, I could go in and show you when the dates show up, but I don't think that that's necessary. I want to save something like that maybe for the candidates because it would be, let's move on into the future. And I don't want to predict anything, but I don't like how later in 24, the moon declination is crossing his natal moon. Also, with this Chiron, we saw what happened to Abraham Lincoln when the moon declination crossed his Chiron. So yeah, and then it moves through the next spot would be the North Node of Destiny, and that would be in 2025 for him, and then also hitting North Node 2026. I think at this point, I don't want to say it, but I think you may know where I'm going. I don't know. I don't know how much longer he has to go. And on that note, I'm going to take a little pause, a little break, go to the ladies' room before I get into. Wait, I have Mr. Trump's chart here, but I cannot move my toolbar properly. Oh, because I have the screen in full view. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to take a little break. Here's a preview of his chart, and I am going to be right back. Figure out where the pause button is. So I'm back, and you probably didn't even notice it was just a little blip. So here we have Donald Trump's secondary progressed declination of his moon. And we could see the peaks and valleys that I talked about before. And what's interesting, we're not going to look at his whole career, just the presidential career. So here we have Donald Trump, 2014, 2015. He's definitely coming up to a peak period. And we all know from living in the United States, that is anyway, that this is when he decided he was going to run for president of the United States. And he was hitting a peak period right towards the end of 2015. Started to decline after 2016. But let's take a look. What is this peak period at the very end of 2015? It's his Mercury. And many of you know that it was the things that he was saying that was appealing to the public at that time. They were looking for a new voice. They were looking for new information. He was saying what a lot of people felt in their hearts. He was saying things that nobody else would say. And that was a huge appeal. That was what he ran on back in 2015 into the 2016 election. It's the same thing that he ran on in 2020 and then again in 2024, but we'll see how things changed. So he wins the election in 2016. Interesting, he's inaugurated in 2017, and the moon declination, pulled my little mouse over to the side, and it is crossing Pluto. So once again, here we're seeing the power coming in. We saw it in George Washington's chart. We saw it in Abraham Lincoln's chart, both right after they were inaugurated. And I think that that is really interesting within itself. So if I pull the chart over a little bit more, we know that he ran again for the 2020 election, in which he lost to Joe Biden. So if I pull my mouse down to 2020, what is it crossing? It's crossing this red line right towards the third quarter of 2020, when that election would have taken place. Now I have to go all the way over to my left, to the eastern horizon, I believe that's what it would be, to see what is this red line? What is this moon declination crossing? So it's interesting because it's the sun. However, remember we saw in Washington's and Lincoln's chart, the sun was depicted by a kind of yellowish tan dotted line over to the sun on the other side of the horizon. We're not seeing that here. We're seeing it in a different fashion. And also, the moon is on its downward spiral, so to speak, or its declination, or its valley. Now, here we are in 2024, and here's the block. And what is it crossing? So for Donald Trump, it's this black and red line, but I have to go over to the side again to see what that is. It's Jupiter and Chiron. Now, what's interesting, Jupiter is the planet of good luck and benefics. So now, if you remember in other charts that we looked at, just because we were on a downward valley doesn't necessarily mean that that is bad. It really depends on what are the planets that it is crossing. So coming up here, 2020, 2021, he wound up crossing that same Jupiter and Chiron line, and he continues to go down, and he's crossing that line on the other side below the equator. Chiron, we saw when the declination of the moon crossed Lincoln's Chiron, he was assassinated. Interestingly enough, let me pull this down. 2024, I want to make sure I'm in the right block. We have also seen possible assassination attempts against him. Jupiter is typically the luck, the planet of good luck and benefics. But I've written an article about Jupiter, and he's actually the planet of equal ills and blessings. And I have to point out, because I have Jupiter in Gemini, and that is transiting Donald Trump's sun right now, his sun, the soul. Jupiter in Gemini is in its detriment. It's in its worst position that it can be. So right now I'm going through my Jupiter return. It's not always the most pleasant thing. Most people are supposed to experience joy and exuberance and good luck and wonderful things happening to them. However, with it being the planet of equal ills and blessings, it was definitely a blessing that he was not assassinated, and that Jupiter could pull him out of whatever downward spiral he's in. And then that's as far as I took the chart. I didn't, because it just keeps continuing to decline, and then it winds up hitting his own moon, and that is around, let's see, that's around 2028 that occurs. And we haven't seen in anybody else's chart a moon declination valley going that low and then continuing beyond the last planet. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with that. I personally have speculations as to what that could be, but that's not the purpose of this particular video. So I'm going to leave that to myself and maybe talk about that another time. Let me come back to here. Here we have Donald Trump's solar return chart. So as an astrologer, we'll look at what the chart looks like at the moment of his solar return. And a solar return is when the sun comes back to the exact degree and minute of the placement of when he was born. But what's different are how the planets are lined up today. So his birthday is January 14th, 1946. But his solar return in 2016 was on June 13th of 2016. Solar returns can happen a day or two before or a day or two after your actual birthday. Also, the place that you're located during your solar return plays a huge role in this. You can order a solar return chart from me if you're celebrating your birthday, give you a full breakdown and report of what your year ahead is expected. But what I want to point out, we saw how he won the 2016 election. He was on that top peak, right? Well, his midheaven, which is pointing him in the direction of what his purpose is in this life as far as his career and employment, it's in the 10th house of career and employment during this time. And that's really fantastic. And then also I want to point out that his sun, his north node of destiny, and Uranus, the planet of expect the unexpected, is conjuncting his Venus and Sun, but it's in the 11th house of the people. And so he was really appealing to the people at that point. Here's his natal Jupiter, and this is the transiting Jupiter. It was right on his IC, the Imium Celli, and that was in the third house of communications. Third house is typically ruled by Gemini, but it is about communications. And so what I'm picking up from this is he was really speaking to the people. We also have Pluto. His natal Pluto is coming right up on his ascendant. And so that's him stepping into that power. I really find that that was pretty interesting because we saw that in the peaks and the valleys. And then the solar return Pluto was in the 6th house. And that's your day-to-day work, like what you're doing for the people, for the public, in mundane astrology. So that all made sense to me. Oh, also too, the solar return, midheaven, and Uranus were in Aries at that time. Aries is new beginnings, something brand new, something new launching. And so that just lent to what else I was seeing with his chart. We look at the solar return, though, for 2024, and those same planets are now in the 12th house. And you'll see my little blurb here on the side. The 12th house is about endings. It is about your hidden strengths and weaknesses. It is also about institutions such as hospitals, jails, known as the house of self-undoing, suffering, and sorrow. So his vital life force, that sun, is in the 12th house for his solar return this year. And that occurred on June 13th, at a different time, obviously. The midheaven and Neptune and Saturn are all in Pisces this year. That is also the last sign. Pisces typically rules the 12th house. There's a lot of fogginess and confusion. There's no clarity here when I see that. Also, too, we have Mars with Chiron in separate signs, but here we have the wounded healer right here, the wounds in that 10th house of the career. And Mars is aggression. What else? Also, where we saw Pluto coming up in the 6th house the last time, where the power was, that is empty. And also the 2nd house is showing empty. The ascendant is too far away from his own ascendant. Often when we look at charts of winning candidates, there's a correlation with the ascendant, very close to the ascendant. Either it's approaching or it is just barely separating. At least that's what I have seen in my experience. And then I have a tri-wheel here where I have a directed solar arc, which if you've had a reading by me, you know that I put the natal chart in the middle and then this in the center. The middle wheel is taking all of these planets and progressing or evolving them 1 degree for every year the person is alive. similar to that moon declination chart. And then I look and see how these things are lined up. And then on the outer wheel, it is the current transits. I drew up this wheel on August 22nd. I mean, on August 21st, because I felt like something was happening with his health. And Pluto has since retrograded back into Capricorn, and it's in his fifth house. We have Neptune, solar arc Neptune, right on his south node and his moon. And it's in the house of the people when we look at mundane astrology. And so I feel like he's losing favor. There's a lack of clarity, there's confusion. The message isn't the same this time as it was in 2016. Also, I have pointed out various solar and lunar eclipses that have occurred. Oh, sorry. I have this chart going, this arrow going in the wrong direction. But these eclipses are hot points in his chart that are activating areas. And it could be good, it could be bad. Um, it's indifferent actually, but they are activating and supercharging the energy. So most recently we had the lunar eclipse at 25, and it's right on the cusp of the eighth house. And the eighth house typically represents death or undoing. It's in Pisces, that lack of clarity again. Although I do like that Saturn is transiting the seventh house, because he does have quite a bit of public favor. Saturn, though, is still currently retrograde. And then we have his sun, North Node Uranus, natally in the 10th house. So he would always do good. He would always do well career-wise. But however, we have Mars in Gemini. There's volatility there. We have the Jupiter in Gemini, which I just talked about. It's in the worst place. It's in the worst sign that it can be in. It's in its detriment, because Jupiter is ruled by the opposite sign of Sagittarius. And so it's not awfully bad, but it could go either way. And with it being in the sign of Gemini, the twins, it could go either way. And then the vertex, this is like someone coming in. Is that to aid him? But it is right, it's conjuncting Uranus. That could even be, somebody stepping in for him career-wise, like JD Vance taking over. What I don't have marked here, and I really wanted to point it out, we have Uranus, which is currently retrograde, but it just crossed his natal midheaven, and Algol, which is a fixed star in the sky, known as the Devil's Head, the Medusa, and it's often symbolized by beheading or losing one's head. And this will be within, I think, 2 degrees of his midheaven on election day. And that 23-degree is exactly where Algol is. Sailors, when they saw Algol in the sky at night, they would not sail, because they knew that it meant imminent death or destruction. And so we've seen a lot of really crazy things in the weather lately. Algol has been very active. What else? His Mercury, which we saw in the previous charts, Mercury, the communication, the voice, the message, was definitely in favor in the previous charts. Well, now it is in the 12th house of self-undoing. So his words are actually unraveling everything that he did for the last decade. Um, Everything is to his detriment, I believe. And then we also have the sun in the 12th house. Oh, well, sorry, that was at the time that I pulled this chart. That was at the time I pulled this chart. But the midheaven, the solar arc midheaven, is conjuncting the natal. Now, it's really about 2 years out from conjuncting the natal Pluto. However, you got to remember it's 12th house again. And this midheaven, if it's representing his career being at the top of his game, it's already progressed to the 12th house. So to me, that says within 2 years or less from the time I drew up this chart, his career would be over or would look completely different, because Pluto also represents transformation, change. Um, Things are definitely transforming, and it's in the 12th house. And I don't want to make any predictions as to what would happen to him, but 12th house, just to go back to my little blurb here, the 12th house is about endings. It is about hidden strengths and weaknesses. It is also about institutions such as hospitals, jails, known as the house of self-undoing, suffering, and sorrow. Now the money house, the second house, we've had two eclipses here very recently, one in March and then one just this week on October 2nd. I don't even know what today is. Today's October 4th. So 2 days ago, we had a lunar eclipse in Libra, 5 degrees, 10 degrees. That eclipse was right on his Venus. So I would think that, he could be getting an influx of money. He could be bleeding money because natally his Chiron is right there. He could be bleeding money, or with it being Venus, um, that's typically a benefic. However, lunar eclipse, I think that funds could be very tight. It's also conjuncting Saturn. That's restrictions, obstacles, and blockages, especially in the second house of money. And I think I covered everything that I wanted to here. All right. And then we have Donald Trump's chart in the center with the election day chart on the outside. And so remember I showed you before how that 11th house of the people was favored? Well, now we have Mars entering Leo on this day, entering the 12th house. We just talked about the 12th house. And Mars it's in a sister fire sign. It's heat, aggression, anger, but it could also be action. It could be used for good. Um, and it's also approaching his own natal Mars. However, at the beginning of December, it will never make it far into Leo because it will retrograde, and it will be retrograding back into Cancer, where we'll be staying for several months until next year. So Mars does not like to be in Cancer. It's one of its least favorite signs. Mars is hot and fiery, and Cancer is watery and emotional. And it's like putting a wet blanket on a hot, steamy lover. And, it's just not pleasant. It's also Mars in Cancer is often very volatile because Cancer is ruled by the moon. And it is also our emotions. And the moon changes signs every 2 to 2.5 days. So Mars never knows which end is up, and its emotions are changing every 2 to 2.5 days. So you never know what's going to lash out and then be remorseful the next day and be all cute and cuddly and then turn into a total jerk. Um, And that's for everybody, actually. So here we do have Saturn in the seventh house. And that is speaking to the people, but it's with Neptune and the transiting midheaven. There is lack of clarity and confusion, maybe. I don't think that that's completely terrible. However, we don't have anything really in Virgo, so to speak. That's interesting. I mean, the IC is there, but there aren't any planets. But this is the house of the self. See anything insignificant. There's that Jupiter in Gemini that I spoke about, and it is conjuncting his north node exactly. And then it's within 3 degrees of Uranus, the planet of expect the unexpected, and it's within 2 degrees of his sun. And it's in his natal 10th house. So, like I said, this is where I'm not sure because Jupiter in Gemini, worst placement that it could be in. But being said, I have Jupiter in Gemini, I do have some good things that happen. So this could go either way. It could be two different things happening at the same time, or, we could be totally shocked and surprised. Then we have Uranus within 2 degrees of his midheaven. And don't forget, we have that beast, Algol. I don't have it shown in the chart here. I should have put it. It is a fixed star in the sky. And anyone that has anything 23 to 26 of Taurus, it's very difficult. And I'm just going to leave it at that. What else? The other thing that I have concern for about this election day chart with Donald Trump is Pluto is in Capricorn and it is right on the cusp of his 6th house. And that is his health, that is his mental health. It is opposing Mars. And so, does something happen to him health wise, or is this just emotional wise? These aren't emotional signs other than the anger in Leo, but the loss of power in Capricorn, I don't know. I feel like this is very combative and dangerous. So we will just have to really wait and see how that is going to play out. But I saw that in the chart, forever ago, and I said, wow, like and this was back when Joe Biden was the candidate. And I said, the way I felt was, even on election day, we may not even know who the winner is. And there will definitely be some volatility because Pluto is the planet of death and endings, but it's also change and transformation. And Mars is the planet of war and violence and anger, but it's also the planet of action and new beginnings. So, there are two sides to every single coin and scenario. That's why I said it's so hard for me to really pick and choose as to, who will be the favored candidate, because it looks good and not so good for both. All right, so here we have JD Vance. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him, and I don't have any charts. I just wanted to show what his, there we go. Oh, I'm trying to make this bigger. There we go. So here we are in 2024, and his declination is on the upswing. What I find really interesting, oh, for JD Vance is, I keep messing this up, I'm sorry. And I did it again. Okay. If you look into the 2030s, he will be reaching a peak. And he is young enough. So I think that he will be around for quite some time in politics. This moon declination does cross his Chiron. And we've talked quite a bit about that. But it also is hitting his midheaven. And so there could be quite a bit of a career boost. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't run for president in 2028. But here we are in 24. He is on the uprise, and right around the time of the election, he's not specifically crossing any any major line. Earlier in the year, yes, but I would say that this was probably closer to the spring and early summer. So let's see what this blue line is. And the blue line is Venus. And Venus would be money. It would be appeal. A lot of people say that he is good looking. He has those blue eyes, and they are lined very well, so they pop. Or is that just super thick eyelashes? I don't know. But anyway, he does have the bluest eyes of anybody I've seen. But with that being Venus, and we're talking mundane astrology, did he, somebody put a lot of money into him so that he could be in this election? That is a very good possibility. But keep an eye on JD Vance, because it looks like he has a very long career in politics, and he could possibly run for president in 2028. What happens at inauguration? That's right. Like, he could even win based on this. And then it will be crossing his north node. Wait, let's see what this black line, and yeah, north node, definitely. So almost looks like he could be destined, but there's a good possibility that he could change his message in the next few years, and maybe even change party and appeal to the masses a little bit more. All right, and here we have Kamala Harris, and she, she was a prosecutor, then a senator, and then she got picked, excuse me, by Joe Biden in and around 2019. And look, she was on an upswing. And here she is peaking right in 2024. Now, I want to go back and show you. This is Donald Trump. He was hitting his peak in 2016. Okay, keep that in mind. All right, back to Kamala. So when she got picked by Joe Biden, and then here's the election of 2020, this moon declination, it was on the upswing, it was going into a peak, and it was crossing her midheaven of career. So she was definitely coming into hitting her stride in her career. And now here we are, 2024. And this is right around the election time. It's not crossing any line in particular, but I'm going to point something interesting out. You can look over here to my left, maybe it's your right, depending on how it comes up on the screen. This is the North Node of Destiny. And in Vedic astrology, she is in a Rahu dasha, so to speak. She's in a period of North Node prosperity in Vedic astrology, and I think it's a 12-year cycle. So this moon rise declination does not have to, it already crossed the North Node back in mid 2023. So that kind of goes back to Joe Biden's chart when I said, I think he knew maybe towards the end of 2023 that something wasn't quite right. And she was preparing herself, even though I don't think that she thought that it would happen. She still had to get ready. Um, and I think that it's evident in these peaks and valleys. And then this North Node energy carries her from 2023 all the way through about just before 2026. And so then it starts to go on its decline. And let's see what we have. Now it's crossing the Pluto, the power line, in 27. So I would think something pretty big is going to happen during that time. Prior to that, if he does win this presidential election, he could just be working from 25 to 27 to get her stride going. And then she really comes into her power probably in the spring of 27. Something pretty big could happen where she's finally recognized for who she is and respected for who she is. And I'm just going to keep it at that because after this election, I kind of don't feel like she would win a second term. And you saw the JD Vance chart, but I have some other interesting information. Yeah, so she starts to go down into a valley. Being the president of the United States is extremely exhausting. If she does run in 28, again, what happens in 28? We have, well, it would be right around about in here. And what line is that? What line is that? It's the midheaven again. So interesting. In 28, if she were to run again, she's going to hit that same midheaven as when Joe Biden picked her to be his vice presidential candidate. And she could definitely win. And then that would carry her through 32, and she would definitely not run. She would, well, she can't because she would have served 2 terms, and then she's not hitting any personal planets. Like, this is going into retirement. She would still probably be in public service, possibly, but it looks like she would take a few years off, and then she would pick up somewhere around 2033 a brand new career and something and the sun coming in, something brand new for her. But I feel like she could definitely achieve a lot. And this arc, being in North Node Dasha and, a 12-year period of North Node energy, actually in Vedic astrology, kind of says to me that she could very well win this presidential election. It's close to the same energy as Donald Trump had in 2016. So looking at her charts real quick, and then I'll do Tim Walz and we will be finished. This is her solar return for 2023. Her birthday is October 20th. Her solar return was on the 21st. So this would be her coming into being a vice president, obviously, but then in that solar return year, stepping into the role of presidential candidate. And I'm not really seeing anything other than, I mean, like Saturn on Saturn. She just went through a Saturn return, and that is really important, especially because I'm going through my Saturn return as well. But if you remember earlier, I said Saturn being commitment and obligation and stepping up to the plate. It's right on the cusp of the fifth house. Depending on what house system you use, it could actually even be in the fourth house, which is of the people. And here we have Jupiter transiting her natal Uranus, or I'm sorry, her solar return Uranus. So that is something extremely unexpected, and there could be good luck and blessings. And not to mention is she also had a Jupiter return at that point. Excuse me. Or I'm like, yeah, she was also going through Jupiter return. With Mars being up here in the 10th house, you know, I talked about it. There's aggression there, but it's also new starts, new beginnings, taking action. And here we have Uranus and Pluto and Venus on her Venus in the 11th house. And remember, I'm going to go back and show you Trump's chart from 2016. His solar return, he was having similar in the 11th house of the people. All right. And is there anything else that I have to note? No, not really. Now here's her solar return chart for this year. So she has not had her birthday yet, but it is coming up. And just some things to point out with the ascendant being in Capricorn, that is leadership. We have Venus in the 11th house. Her midheaven is along with the sun and Mercury, planet of communication, 10th house of career. So that is huge. And we saw that in Donald Trump's chart as well. And the only thing that could be the moon and Jupiter in Gemini in the 6th house. But with it being Gemini, it's two of something. It's definitely could be women and men alike. 6th house of let's get to work, let's do this thing. People are responding to her message. Although Mercury is in Scorpio on her solar return. And there could be something revealed prior to the election, or, you know, maybe she's holding back or people aren't hearing her message. Scorpio could be muddled. Scorpio could be secretive. I'm not really loving her solar return chart other than the fact that the sun, moon, and Mercury are in the 10th house, and we have Venus in the 11th. And where is her Saturn? Oh, so her Saturn is in the 3rd house of communication. Like, let's get to work, let's get the message out, but it's retrograde. And even though it's far away from Neptune, I don't know if people can hear her message, or they just don't want to hear her message. You know, she's trying, but it's just not getting out. And with it being retrograde, you know, she's being counter slammed by false messaging. And that's what a lot of this Neptune is. It's also trining this Venus, this Mercury. And so, you know, there have been a lot of lies, a lot of negative publicity And that's something that I definitely have to point out. Um, we can go back and take a look at Mr. Trump's chart and see that was 2016. This is for his solar return. Where is Neptune? It's in the third house. That's about lying. Where is um, Mercury in Cancer? That's also trying, I'm sorry, that's squaring. So there have been a lot of lies. People see it, people know it, but there are a lot of people because of Neptune that are not seeing it. They're not hearing it. And I think that's making this whole entire election very difficult. So if I look at her tri-wheel with the solar arc, the evolution of her chart, we have South Node, which is like, there's destiny, but there's release here. It's in Libra, which is justice, balance, and harmony. And it is on her natal sun. And this is on election day. That's huge to me. We have her evolved Saturn on the uprise, and it is at 1 degree of Capricorn here. It's not hitting anything, but I like that it is in the seventh house. Donald Trump also has his Saturn in the seventh house. The moon will be in Capricorn at 5 degrees, so it is conjuncting this Saturn. We also have the planet of power in the eighth house. And this is other people's money in mundane astrology. This is the economy. This is, it's our piggy banks and our pocketbooks and our, the groceries we could buy and the commodities. And, that is a very good power move to have Pluto because it's bringing change and transformation to the economic system, possibly. I love that transiting Saturn is up here, right on the cusp of the 10th house, conjoined the transiting midheaven, and her midheaven is in Pisces as well. She does have Chiron here, so this could be a huge burden for her should she be elected to be the first female president of the United States. That's a lot of weight to carry. She will feel that. But with Saturn being up here on her midheaven, to me, that says that she will be able to commit to this and carry that burden. She's very disciplined, and I think that she could do a great job. Also, her evolved moon, her progressed moon, has just entered Pisces, and there's compassion there, something that you're not getting from the other side, possibly. Now we have transiting Neptune at 27, and it's conjuncting her Jupiter. This could be very lovely, but there could be a lot of confusion. It is right on the cusp of the 10th of her career. And this is where I get jammed up in my head, overthinking things. Now, traditionally, Jupiter did rule Pisces before Neptune came into play. So the two planets, that modern ruler and traditional ruler of Pisces, are right up at her midheaven. I love it because Saturn is here. I love it because her midheaven is in Pisces. And but I don't think it will be clear on election day if she is the winner or not. And that's what I'm going to put out there. Now, remember we talked about the 11th house of the people and how that showed up in Donald Trump's chart of 2016. Here we have the North Node of Destiny directly on her moon. Her progressed North Node is, just within a few minutes of an exact conjunction on her moon in Aries of new beginnings and action in the 11th house of the people. And I really like that very much for her. We also have that Jupiter in Gemini that I spoke about, and I can't find my mouse. There it is. It is right on her Mars in Gemini, the progressed Mars in Gemini, or I should say the directed. Well, it is progressed. And then what else? I know I have this arrow here, but I think that that was a fluke. So, and this Jupiter in Gemini, it could go either way, actually. Now I love that the progressed ascendant is on its way towards her own ascendant. And I said earlier that that is a really good symbol when the ascendant is close to one's own ascendant, that good luck comes from that. Usually, I've heard a lot of astrologers say that that's how they're predicting who that Kamala Harris would be the winner. I'm still not so sure. And I feel like with this Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces right on the cusp of the 10th, that Neptune brings fogginess, it brings disinformation, misinformation, lies. Um, I don't feel like if she is the winner and that we will even know right away. So also looking at the transits, here we have, where is Mars? And I should have put an arrow here. We have Mars that has just entered Leo, fire and fire, and it is opposing this Pluto. And I told you back when we looked at Trump's chart, um, there's going to be quite a fight for the values and for the control of other people's money, the country's money. So I don't feel like this is going to go very smoothly this election. There will be a lot of fighting. I don't want to say bloodshed, but you've got the planet of war and the planet of death fighting against each other. They're in opposition. And so, we have, and then let's just point out Capricorn, which is the old regime, and Cancer, which is that feminine, softer energy, fighting tooth and nail through this election. And then this was just a quick other ways to look at her natal chart with the solar return chart. We just saw that in a smaller version, right? And then here's another tri-wheel that I was pointing out, just pointing out where those eclipses occurred that bring energy or disruption into her chart, but in all the right places. I love that her progressed sun has just entered Virgo in the third house of communication and messages. It is conjunct Mercury within 4 degrees, but we don't look at it that way here. Because natally, he has the sun and Mercury, you can see right here, within 4 degrees of each other. So they will always travel with each other, always around the wheel. But when I'm doing a solar arc chart, I always look to see when a planet is getting ready to change signs, because that means something huge is happening in that person's life. And so here the sun moves into Virgo. That's about getting to work. It's about the details, the day to day, being able to handle things. It's that mental ability. It's in the third house of communications and messages. I think if I had to pick just one aspect that would say to me, I think she could do this, it would be that entering a new phase, along with these other things that I have pointed out already. Also, transiting Mercury, if I haven't said it, in the sixth house, about getting the message out to the people, being for the people. The one thing she'll have to be a little careful with is to not get preachy. Don't come back with, I told you so. Oh, I said this or whatever. Like, people can get nasty with words. We hope that she won't be doing that. Um, but she has a fire in her communication with it being in Sagittarius. And so, but I think it will quickly calm down because Mercury will move into Capricorn and there will be a more serious tone. Um, there was something about Mercury. I know that it felt like there was something coming out in the news. I think I might have mentioned it already, but we're going to have to keep our eyes open for the next month because there will be more newsworthy information coming out. Some could be shocking, some secrets revealed. This is for either side, either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Not sure, or their running mates, but something newsworthy. I will predict there. And then here we have Tim Walz. He's been a public servant for a very, very long time, but many of us have only heard about him until recently. I know I didn't hear about him until I saw his name listed as one of the possible vice presidential running mates. So, not really going to go looking back on his career because I did not do that type of research. This is really about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. But here we are in 2024. And when was it? It was almost the end of the summer of 2024. I would say right about here that Tim was tapped to be the vice presidential candidate. And let's see, what is that line? Oh, sorry. I have a crazy mouse here. 2024, this little red dotted line, that is Mercury. And, there's some fire, there's some action. This is some brand new energy. This is something that is pulling him into something brand new. He's been the governor for 2 terms now. Previous to that, he was in Congress for 12 years. And now it's like time to step up and take some action. We can also see, now he is also young. He looks much older than he is, but believe it or not, Tim Walz and I are the same age. I'm the same age as Kamala Harris. Well, about 6 months to a year younger. I mean, yeah, I'm 6 months younger than both of them. But, Tim Walz comes off, I don't think I look old. He comes off as looking older, but he is still a young man. Now, remember, I said JD Vance was on the upswing, especially for the 2028 election. Well, so is Tim Walz. And at the 2028, his moon declination hits his ascendant, something about himself, and then and then it goes into Venus in the North Node. But could he possibly, if Kamala doesn't run for a second term, if she wins, could he also maybe run for president against JD Vance? But let's go back to 24. So here we have the moon rising up into crossing Mars. Then at the end of 24, but not quite the end, like the third quarter, I'm going to zoom in. Third quarter, it is crossing his midheaven of career. So this is going to stop sharing. This is why I think that Kamala Harris has probably maybe the best chance based on the astrology. And then also because Tim Walz, his chart looks like he would also be coming into that period of time where his career is going to be changing. So based on that, because Donald Trump, his chart is definitely on the decline. The 2016 chart was evident that he won that election, but after that, I would say no. Now, JD Vance, you want to keep an eye on him because he's on the upswing and he probably has a lot of good things in store for him, as well as Tim Walz. So I don't know. What do you think based on what I showed you? Hopefully you stayed long enough to watch this. I'm going to have to timestamp this because this was a lot of information. I think I've been talking for about 2 hours. Got my tea, my funky background that you keep seeing. My cup keeps disappearing. If you have stayed and watched this whole thing, even if it took you a week to watch the whole thing, thank you, thank you, thank you for watching this. Be sure to subscribe and like this video and tell me what your opinion is. If you're going to be really, really nasty, I'll probably delete your comment. And I don't want to have to turn off the comments. So please be mindful, be courteous, be demure. And I tried to be very, very unbiased. You would never know who I will be voting for. You probably know, but um, you know, I'm looking at this from an analytical point of view. And this is my opinion based on my knowledge in astrology and what I just showed you. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for my stars and cards. Be sure to check out my reading offerings at expressionsoftheuniverse.com. I'm in the way. I'm in the way of my own little thing here. And stay tuned because I am going to be offering some really budget friendly yet gorgeous reading offerings. So stay tuned and I will be announcing them as soon as I have them ready. They are set to private right now because I'm tweaking some things. But once again, thank you, thank you, thank you for watching, and I may have to do a follow-up after the election. We'll see. Good night.